Hey honey, this is an exciting episode for me because I happen to love cars. This is how a car works, how an internal combustion engine works, a little bit of the history behind it, and how inventors add on to layers that are already pre-existing, and they add layers to it, and after several years you get an invention that is efficient and safe and one that you can scale. It's an important episode to me, not because I want you to literally learn how a car works, although that is a gift in itself, but I think you can apply some of the metaphors to other things in life. So when we go into the section of health, you can actually compare a lot of the parts of a car to organs in your body. So it's a helpful way to think, in my opinion. Furthermore, it helps you learn about innovation and engineering. It also helps you with how to think in terms of first principles, thinking in terms of triage. I hope you learn a lot about business here, like how to scale an invention. There are these, one-off inventions, like who's that guy? Howard Hughes invented a plane, I think out of wood, and is huge. I forget what it's called, the Golden Goose, something like that. But you can't scale that. There's a man who is around now named Elon Musk, and when Rivian, his main competitor, released a car, he said good luck scaling. So that's what he's talking about there is the business mindset behind an invention, the ability to scale it versus just having a very expensive one-off. And you can apply this to so many things, and I find it interesting, and I hope you do too. There's an old joke, I think it's like an internet meme, which meme is being used incorrectly, but that's a word invented by, that's a neologism by Richard Dawkins, I think, of The Selfish Gene. But there's an internet meme that goes a guy's room, and they show a picture of the room versus a guy's car, then a girl's room versus a girl's car, and it's always that the girl's room is super clean, you can eat off the floor, and a girl's car is just littered, and a guy's room is littered, but a guy's car you can eat off the furniture, right, off the upholstery. I'm not sure that it is that way, but if it's a joke, there must be some truth behind it, and I would like to know the psychology behind it, because I've been trying to examine that with my friends and with scientists, being like, if that stereotype is true, why is it that way? Is it about that this is a thing that can take you away versus a nest, or I don't know. I just think it's interesting. But some people may say that your girls don't want to learn about cars or whatever. That's not true, although it is a male-dominated industry and field. One of my favorite race car drivers, Danica Patrick, is she's an amazing race car driver, and she's female, and she's cool. And one of the lessons that I always learned from her is when she crashed, she released the steering wheel, the yoke, because it can break your wrist going that fast and when you hit your wheels. I remember that lesson from a crash she was in while I was watching her race. But
Bottom. There you go. Keep digging. 3 wide.
Is that not? Did you see what she did with her hands?
Yeah, all that open wheel experience.
IndyCar, all that open wheel experience. She knew not to hold on to that steering wheel. That is amazing. I saw her do that here in the ARCA race a couple of years ago.
If you hold on to the wheel there, you can break a wrist easily.
Yeah, but
when that wheel wrenches your hands.
Do you just have any idea when you're headed for that wall that fast that you got the time to think about letting go and putting your hands up like that?
Regardless, when you learn anything in life, this or anything else, you take to it when you find something fun in it. They always say, do something that you love. So for whatever you're learning, I hope you can extract something that you respond to versus just what the teacher is trying to show you. So when someone teaches, I have these friends who they'll be like, I was never good at physics. And I'll be like, really? They have a quality brain. I go, so you at 16 in the throes of puberty, oily and pimply, noticing girls, your balls dropped, all these changes in your body, and then someone's trying to talk to you about physics, and you happen to not be able to, you take to it at 16. You don't think it's going to be different at 26, 36, 46? So I would eschew from your thinking anything where you're like, what, I'm not good at that thing. Because you should revisit it, 5-10 years later, and see if you're a different person who can now work well with that discipline. So if you're like, I'm not a good cook, well, maybe you tried when you're 24 in a studio apartment. But it might be different when you're 34. It might be different when you're 94. Maybe that's when you're going to have the passion for it. That's okay. Because, we're changing too. So why I say that is because, say you don't like cars, or you're falling asleep, I hope you revisit it later, because maybe there's something out of it that you'll be like, oh, you know what, I admire this element of it, and I can apply that onto other things. It's not literally about the car that I'm trying to show you. It's just I want to show you other things that you can learn from it. Or I hope you apply that to other disciplines. Yeah, I don't know what I'm saying. I got a new dry erase board. Let's see if this is useful at all. I used to teach on a chalkboard, and then I switched to a dry erase board. I always prefer a chalkboard, but here we are. I made Persian lamb chops. They're marinating right now. Some of the spices and the smells, if they're from Iran, I'm reading a book now called Early Indians, which apparently says that the Alamites or something migrated from Iran to India, so there might be some confluence of flavors and things like that, like the spice trade sort of thing. Anyway, yeah, that's my day today. Everything else is good. Everything else is good. Oh, I just spoke to a lovely young girl who is a specialist in the throat and vocal cords and speech, and I'm having these issues with my throat, so it's mostly because I do like screamo music when I'm by myself in a car.
I got it bad! I got it bad!
And I'm not doing any sort of vocal warm-up or anything. I didn't, we didn't have the money growing up for vocal classes or anything nice like that, so I should learn how to take care of my voice. But there's just some registers that I can't hit anymore that I used to be able to, and I think like vocal nodules and stuff too. Okay, but let's start with the car. So this is called an internal combustion engine. Yeah, so right off the bat you'll be like, so this guy invented this from scratch? No, he didn't. There was an external combustion engine, and all that means is that the combustion is on the outside of the engine, which is a steam engine essentially. You heat up water, and that water creates steam, and that steam is moving a piston, and that piston can move like a train, right? Sorry, my throat's really not doing well. It can move a train. So then you curiously might be like, well, can we get that combustion of like the fire that heats up the water, can we get it on the inside? Maybe that'll be more efficient. Maybe we can contain more of the heat and like thermal energy. And so this is just a logical way to think, so you can apply this to things in your life. As you see something already built, you're like, what can I add to that? What can I tweak on that? What line of code might help with that? And we don't need to make a finished product first. So when you see like a car right now, like you see what's an average car? A Toyota Camry. Or what? Let's take like a nice car. I have a Mercedes. By the way, Benz started he made the first car, named after Benz, and I think his partner's daughter's name is Mercedes, so you get Mercedes-Benz. It has so many, luxury, bells and whistles, this and that, whatever. You don't need any of that, right? The goal here, okay, here's how to think, right? The goal here is this. I want to get to the neighbor's house. I want to go down the street. I want to move my body, 100 yards in front of me. What can I do, right? So according to Newton's third law, I could sit on ice and I can go shoot a gun this way, and I could slowly go like a rocket, right? I could have a friend push me in the back, okay? But now the energy's coming from him. We have something called a wheel. At some point we had to create a wheel. Well, I could put some wheels on a chair, and I can have my friend pull me, okay? But still the energy's coming from him. By the way, that's a rickshaw, and then there becomes an auto rickshaw, which there is in all over the Eastern Hemisphere. But that's a rickshaw with an engine, right? You could ride a dog there. That wouldn't be nice to the dog. You could ride a camel there. You could ride a horse. But the energy source. Now we're thinking about your energy. It's still this animal, or it's me walking. Because the goal that we boil down is, how do I move myself there somehow? What's the easiest way? What's the safest way? What's the most efficient way? What can I use as an energy source? And then we discovered something called crude oil. From your crude oil, you get your kerosene, aviation gas, diesel, gasoline, asphalt, petroleum jelly, all these things, right? Candle wax, I think. When you distill it at different temperatures, they can be captured. So this is like a new thing discovered, thank you to the dinosaurs and to the 99% and to the 99.9% of all living things that are now extinct from millions of years ago. We have this thing that's a high combustion energy source. It's called gasoline, okay. And we have something called steel, which we discovered a long time ago, and aluminum alloy, and all these, okay, so this is now strong enough to contain an explosion. It can warp, it can melt, it can bend, but it seems to be working with the temperature of this combustion. So all you're saying here is, I have a high energy source called gasoline, and if I explode it, well, there's energy. How can I capture that energy? Well, I can put steel around it. And if I capture that energy, how can I now transfer that to my body? Does it move me from the back? Do I put it on a wheel? Do I do it like a rocket ship? Like, what do I do? If I attach a wheel and I can get this energy, this explosion that I contained, and I now transfer it to a wheel, I can go forward. Okay, great. See how like we're logically getting somewhere just with the 5-year-old questions, 7-year-old questions, right? Like a baby can think of these things. Don't overcomplicate it. When we see a car now, the vast majority of it that the average person probably cares about is not necessary for the goal of trying to move you at a decent rate. Even like the seatbelts or the airbag or the windshield, you know, like you don't need any of this stuff. You can strip it all away. So when you think like an engineer, we're actually stripping everything away just to the most basic thing we need. And even you could say, well, I don't need it on 2 wheels. I could do it on 1. It could be on like a unicycle. You know, that's okay. It's okay to think this way and be like, you know, how much do I need? So, you know, logically, the next problems will reveal themselves, and then you'll start to make it more and more comfortable, right? So we're going to see how every layer being added is just making you more comfortable and more applicable, and you know, more nice for the missus and more nice for the common person, and so that humans go, you know what, I want one of those at home. Like that seems like a good. You've now reached like the threshold where I want it at home. Otherwise, it's just like a one-off, invention. Okay, so our goal here is we have this thing called gasoline. It has an explosion, but if we can contain it and we can move it to a wheel, we have a chance at something here. We have a chance at a new way to transport ourselves. By the way, this is for another episode on how to predict the future. How to predict the future is very simple. Dream big and simply of what you want and say it weirdly and strangely, that's okay. And then using engineering and the technology, we'll find a way to try to bring that to fruition. So you could say something weird like, I want to see my cousin halfway around the world right now. Okay, well, in the past we would use sailboats and an oxen cart and all this stuff, and it would take, years to get there. But then we invented an airplane, then we invented ships, and then you might say, well, I can do it on my phone, and I can see him right now. So we'll say the big dream that you want, no matter how strange it is. So like, remember what it was like to dream as a kid, because now all the adults don't remember what it's like to dream. I'm holding on to that as I get older, but it's harder because everyone around me is just in the slave routine sort of thing, and they just stop like imagining things. Like their dreams are now being given to them as a goal each day, but they're not, like, they forgot what it's like to wonder, which is the key to innovation and to like a rich life, in my opinion. And I'll show you when we discuss Einstein why that's critically important when it comes to discovery and science and math and all that. Yeah, okay. And so you can even say weird things like, I want to never die. I want to be resurrected. I want my consciousness to go on forever. That's okay to speak something strange and that might seem wrong into existence, because eventually there might be a day where we can work backwards from there and solve something, and then we'll look back and go, oh, I wish we had this invention like a lot earlier. So dream big, okay, and then we can use engineering to reverse engineer that dream into a version of reality. Okay, so we have, this is from the external combustion engine. We have something called a piston. I'm not the best artist, so bear with me here. Okay, this is my first attempt at the dry erase board on camera. Is not focusing, a lot of things going wrong. Okay, so we have a piston. Yeah, this is very crudely drawn, so bear with me here. We have a piston which is housed inside of a cylinder. This piston can move up and down. When it moves up and down, it turns here. So this is connected to something called the crankshaft. We're looking at it almost on like the z-axis. So this crankshaft extends out, okay? And as this goes down, as the piston goes down, this turns and it moves outward and it comes back up. And when it comes back up, the piston goes up in the cylinder, okay? So that's the motion of the piston inside of a cylinder. It goes down, it goes up. Very simple. It goes down, it goes up. When it goes down and up, this is called a connecting rod, I believe. And this is connected to the crankshaft and can move the crankshaft around like this. What you're noticing here is that linear motion is being now turned into rotational motion, okay? Because this is linear motion and this is rotational motion. This is a horribly drawn, I'm not an artist, so there's a horribly drawn picture, but you're getting the idea here. Okay? Okay, so we got that much down. What's going to happen inside of this chamber is there's going to be an explosion. That explosion is being contained by the strength of the cylinder. So that energy needs to go somewhere and moves the connecting rod and spins the crankshaft. Okay, we have that much down. So what's happening inside all this and all here? And what is this? And why does that look weird? Okay. So inside of the cylinder, and from this you can extrapolate this over several cylinders, so we're just focusing on one. That's the difference between like an i4 engine, like a V6, V12, things like that. But this is just the one cylinder. Here you have, this is called a valve. Why I mentioned this is because when it comes to like the human body, the engine is essentially the heart, and you have a valve in your heart, right? Which as you get older may need to get replaced with with a cow valve, with a pig valve. I made a joke when your grandfather got his valve replaced. I was like, thank God you're not Muslim, because you can't do a pig valve. Muslim or Hindu, because if you can't do a pig valve or a cow valve here. But yeah, this is a valve. See how it's kind of like a bell shaped, and that's to make a seal here, sealing. So when this opens up, so when this valve moves inward like this, it opens up and it allows for stuff to flow in. That stuff that's going to flow in is air and gas. Air plus gasoline. That's why you put gasoline in your car. So air plus gasoline goes into here. When that goes into there, this piston moves down as it fills it up with air and gasoline. Then this closes. It seals. Then the piston moves up and it compresses that air and gas. Then the spark plug ignites with a spark, and there's a big explosion. That's called a power stroke. There's a big explosion, and that explosion rockets a piston downward. Okay, so that's now moving the crankshaft with a lot of power. And then it spins and it goes back up, and as it goes back up, this valve opens, and it allows for the exhaust, which is like the burnt gas and air, to now leave the chamber. So what I just described there is what's going on inside of a piston. It's called a four-stroke engine. So all the stroke means is each major movement of the piston. So starting from nothing, one major movement is the valve opens, gas and air come in, and now the piston goes down. That's one stroke. So like a stroke is every time the piston either goes up or down, right? So now it's going down, fills with air and gasoline, the valve closes, then it goes up and it compresses that. That's a second stroke. Then the spark plug sparks, boom, explosion. It goes down again. That's the third stroke, also called the power stroke. And then it goes back up to release all that burnt, spent air and gasoline out of the chamber. And that's through the other valve, which has to open up and release that gas. So that's now a fourth stroke going up. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a four-stroke engine. There's a two-stroke engine, I believe a one-stroke engine, things like that. But this is the most common engine. It's called a four-stroke engine, okay? And as you can assume, these valves and everything need to be working in sync with each other, right? Like you can't randomly have a valve like a little bit open, because then your gas is gonna escape that way. You can't have the timing be off where this valve opens, but then also that one accidentally opens, oh no. So everything is down to like an exact in sync timing. I'm gonna show you how they solve for all this. So over the valve, what's controlling the opening and the closing, this is like a spring here, let's say. This is called a dual overhead cam. And a cam is just something, it's almost like the shape of like a comma or like an apostrophe. And so as that cam, like say this is the valve with a spring. That's the worst, huh honey? I'll do a better job of this later when we get more funding. There's a side that's off center here, like it's not like a perfect circle. There's a side that's off center like that. This is the valve. So when it turns, see nothing, but then that extended part moves the valve open. Then it slides up and it goes away. So that's how the valve's opening and closing is based on the shape of that cam. So you have that cam there on this one valve, okay? And we have several valves all in a row. So there's a whole bunch of cams at different angles, and they're all around a shaft, right? Which is just a stick. This is the Z-axis here. It's like a stick with a bunch of cams at different angles. So that's called a cam shaft. Okay, and because it's two of them, you call it a dual overhead cam. Otherwise, there's a single overhead cam too, but I think the most common one now is a dual overhead cam. So that's what I'm showing you here. Imagine this on like the Z-axis, like it's you're coming out. This is a shaft, like a stick, and there's a bunch of different commas on it, and those different commas are at different angles, different shapes. They have to be exact. It's all measured and graphed out, and it's all exact. And it's all affixed to precision here. So as this spins, it opens up the valve and it closes it. Like it's not randomly deciding when it opens. It's all based on what the what the angle of like a cam is. Like another way to think of a cam is if you ever see like a window where like you slide a thing to lock it, that's a cam too. I think that word originated in China, or the invention of it might have been from China, I think. So yeah, this is a dual overhead cam. These are the two shafts. These are all the cams on it, and those just control the opening and the closing of the valves. The most common kind of a piston now, on the one piston, you'll have 2 intake valves and 2 exhaust valves. So remember, I'm showing you just a simple one, and then you just keep multiplying it for more luxury and smoothness and all that stuff. But you know, you don't need that many. You can have just a single cylinder with a single overhead cam with a single valve and a single valve. That's like the very basics of it. And then as people are like, well, this is too juddery, well, I want this, well, I want a smoother engine, well, I want more power, okay, then we add more and more and more and more and more. But like the simplicity of like invention is just like, what is like the one thing that we need? And then we can always multiply it. But it's like I want a coffee cup where my hand doesn't hurt when I hold it. Then I'll add a stem or like a handle. Yeah, but I want to also be able to grab it with my left hand. Okay, then we'll add a second handle. But that is not necessary for the goal of you said, I don't want my hand to burn when I grab the cup. We just added the one handle or like a stem or whatever. So you just keep adding layers to it. But like the necessary thing is just you have a cylinder that can move that explosion to a rotational motion, and you have a single cam on each side and a single valve on each side because it's intake and exhaust. And then we add more valves because we want it to be more luxurious and more efficient and more clean and more power and things like that, layer by layer, right? Okay, so yeah, the most common one now has 2 intake valves and 2 exhaust valves. So there's a whole bunch of cams, double overhead cam. There's a spark plug which just has a spark, just like a lighter. There is a piston contained inside of a very strong wall, a cylinder. This is, I believe, called the connecting rod, and it connects to the crankshaft. I should detail this more in a bit. So that's the basics there, honey. Okay, now one stroke is down and it fills with air and gas. Second stroke is up, it compresses it. Third stroke is the power stroke, boom, explodes. That's the third stroke, and the fourth stroke goes up and it exhausts as this opens up this valve to exhaust. And when this is opening this up, the cams here are in a place to make sure that that's not open. Otherwise you would have the exhaust going in both ways, which you don't want. You don't want like a floppy valve, which you can get in your heart and things like that, right? It's kind of fun to move it on to health. Okay, so yeah, so like an engine now that you have might be called an I4, and that 4 just means 4 cylinders, and the I means that it's in a row, which stands for inline 4 cylinders. Or you might have like a V6 engine, and somebody might be like, I have a V6, V8, V12 engine, whatever. That just means that 4 cylinders in a row, that's inline 4. If you add 2 more cylinders, 2 more cylinders, that's now 6 inline, right? And if you make it like a V, now you have a V6 engine. Say 6 cylinders in a V, and they all are, each one has a piston in it, and it's all going to connect to the crankshaft right here, still rotating it. And the reason for that is you get like a smoother ride and things like that. So, and also when you talk about engine displacement, somebody might say this is a 6-liter engine or like 1,000 cc motorcycle engine. All that means is this: if somebody has a V6 engine, there's 6 cylinders, and somebody has a 6-liter engine, it's the same thing, right? A 6-liter V6 engine. That just means that each one of the cylinders is 1 liter. So 1 liter times 6 cylinders is 6 liter. And how you get that is pi r squared, which is the radius of the actual piston, r squared multiplied by pi. That gives you the area of the piston multiplied by the length of the cylinder, so then you get the volume of that cylinder, right? And the issue with that is, you can brag about how big your engine is, but that's going to take up a lot of gas, right? So sometimes you need that. You need just like a big, beefy, powerful engine. A lot of your trucks and SUVs, things like that. So you need a lot of big, powerful engine. My Vespa, I think, was 150 cc. So that, and cc is exactly milliliter, right? So there's 1,000 milliliters. There's 1,000 milliliters in a liter. So if you have a motorcycle that's a 1,000 cc, that's like a 1 liter engine. And my Vespa was, I think, 150 cc. So that is what, 150 milliliter? So that is 0.15 liter engine. And that's enough to bring me and another person around. That's about 300 pounds going, and I can go up to 50, 60, 70 miles an hour on that. So it's enough. You don't need these larger engines. It's only based on like the work that you're going to do with it. If you're hauling stuff all day, then you need a stronger engine. It's just harder to do with a smaller one. Okay. So that's engine displacement. It's about the size of this, each one. Okay. The crankshaft itself is off-centered, meaning this connecting rod is not in the center. It's connected to a piece here, so that it can spin. And there's also counterweights everywhere, and that's so that the engine just doesn't stop. There's a counterweight that has some momentum that ensures that the next one keeps going. And also, there are inventions like to make it more smooth. If it's a 4-cylinder engine, you don't want it going 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. So I think it's something like 1 3 1 3 2 4, which makes sure that the engine is more smooth for the rider. So these are all just layers you add as you get complaints from people who go like, well, this is not fun. Even you don't need shocks and suspension or any of that stuff. Then you'll be bouncing around like this, and then eventually be like, I think we should do something about this. I'm about to vomit. So let me add shocks and struts and all these things. But it's just layers that you can add. Regarding your safety, they did this a lot too. There used to be something where people who were in an accident would have this angel halo of death like around their neck or around their head because the windshield was just all glass and it's just unforgiving. Now it's a version of plexiglass so that it'll break and like mold with you, and it's all safety layers that they just add. The airbag, seat belts, like a crumple zone like we talked about in the last episode, things like that. But the first several cars were not that safe. The first several of all innovations were not that safe, and then as people get hurt or they die, then we hopefully learn from it, and then we add layers of safety, which include pollution, all this stuff, as we'll talk about the catalytic converter. And then I want to connect all this as you learn about interdisciplinary knowledge regarding economics, safety. There's an actor that just got shot to death because his catalytic converter was getting stolen. It's a story very dear to my heart, and we will discuss all this because you have interdisciplinary knowledge. That's the goal here. So you're seeing how all the threads interweave here. Okay, but we'll start with just these parts. So even the crankshaft itself has off-center pieces to make sure that this keeps going. And this crankshaft, on the outside, there's like a pulley here, and the outside of here on the z-axis, there's a pulley here, there's a pulley here, and what you can do is you can put what's called a timing belt around all this. There's actually going to be other pulleys here that you bend it inward like that, I believe. And this is called a timing belt. And that's like a big rubberish belt that makes sure that everything is moving at the same time. So it's not like a random firing of anything or like a random rotation of anything. If the crankshaft is moving this much, then this cam has to move that much, and it's physically connected by the timing belt. And if it gets loose or anything, then you can move this tension pulley in and out to give it more tension. Okay, so that assures that everything is moving in sync, and because otherwise you're going to have a lot of problems. Okay, in the cylinder itself, there's a couple of rings here, if you notice. These first two are called a compression ring. They help seal the chamber for compression. And this third one is called an oil ring. Because what's happening is, as you can imagine, with a lot of fire and explosions, it gets really hot, things expand, things get dirty and sooty. So you have oil coming in here. I think some of it comes from the oil ring, I believe. And it lubricates this wall. So it's lubricating that wall. Otherwise it's steel on steel, and it's so fictitious, which is not a word, but I like to use it, that it gets hot and then it can melt. That's why if you notice your engine temperature is going up, stop the car. Otherwise you're going to need a new engine block. So stop the car, let it cool immediately in a safe place. Go off the shoulder or get off the highway or whatever, but just let the car cool down, because this metal will melt and fuse. Then there's no repairing it. So shut off the car and just wait and just give me a call and I'll help you out. Okay, but yeah, and just give me a call and I'll help you out. So that oil is there at a certain viscosity for that engine. That's there to lubricate it and to help clean it and to keep everything fluid, just like you would do for anything. Adding lubricant help keeps it fluid and flowing, right? And that lubricant has a certain viscosity, which you can see on the number of the oil itself. And this is why we recommend, after depending on your car. Most cars, 3 to 5,000 miles. My car is 10,000 miles to change your oil. And I'll show you how to change your oil. It's a lot of fun. It's not hard. It's a lot of fun to do it. I have been doing it since I was 6 or 7 years old, I think. Maybe 5 or 6 or 7 years old. It's a lot of fun. So we'll show you how to change your oil, and you'll see that it comes out black. And there's a certain order to do it, and then you put in nice clean oil there. So as we talk about your health, we're going to talk about how to keep yourself, your heart healthy, lubrication, water, hormones, even as we talk about the coolant. That's the equivalent of sweating, right? So there's so many comparable things here that I think are fun when you talk about health and physiology. So we have oil coming in here, and this oil ring scrapes it back down. It goes into an oil sump here, which is just an oil pan. Then it goes to an oil filter, so that it can get clean, and then it goes into the engine to be used. And I believe it also goes around the dual overhead cams and the valves as well to keep everything lubricated. Okay, notice how it's going to the filter first, so we can think about filters in terms of like a liver or like a kidney in your own body, right? Your kidneys right now, as you're watching this, are filtering your bloodstream. Your liver as well, especially you'll notice it if you've had like a cocktail the night before, then your liver's going to go into overdrive. And if you overuse that liver, that's what cirrhosis of the liver is, right? So if you're drinking a bottle a day for 40 years, you're going to burn out your liver. You have ruined that, and you'll see jaundice and all this stuff, but we'll go on to that later. But you have ruined that filter. So there are filters in your body too, just like there is in a car. So it goes to the filter before it goes to all of the parts of a car. Okay, what else can I show you here? I think there's most of the basics you should know. Linear motion to the, sump, oil filter, okay, that, okay, here's a cool one. In my opinion, I find these things cool. I don't know if they are. So should we talk about the coolant first, or the flywheel, or the transmission? Well, let's talk about the issues with an engine, because as you invent things, you'll notice issues are arising. So then we need to solve. If you're like a founder of a company, it's all about solving problems. It's kind of like playing like a game of whack-a-mole. And as a new problem comes up, you gotta hit it and make sure that you're on it. So if you don't like doing that, then you shouldn't start a company. And if you don't like doing that, then you shouldn't be an inventor. But invention is that you are solving problems. Okay, so one of the problems here, let's talk about the coolant. Then we'll talk about the flywheel and the transmission. This engine gets really hot. We have all these explosions going, explosions, brrr, and you multiply that over 4 cylinders, 6 cylinders, 8 cylinders, whatever. Brrr, all these pistons are firing. It's there's a metaphor I have regarding humans and like their energy levels. Like if somebody's super happy at a party, you'll notice that everyone else kind of sinks down. Like it's never quite matching up at the same time. So then I've always made a metaphor that is kind of like a piston, like when one's up, one's down, or halfway down, or whatever. But we can philosophize on that later. But okay, you have all these pistons going up. It's getting hot, so we got to cool it down somehow. Otherwise, this is all going to melt. Great. So what we do is this. One way to cool it is through air cooling, which is there's like a grill, and as you're in motion, the wind literally cools down the engine. On a lot of motorcycles, on my original motorcycle, that was air cooled. Then there's liquid cooled. Liquid cooled means that we are going to be running cool liquid around the engine, as if I like put like a hose around you and I put cold water on that. And so the water's never quite physically touching you, but the cold hose is. So then you feel like, okay, I'm cooling off a bit, right? Or say I gave you like an ice pack, so then you're cooling off from the ice pack. Problem is, what happens after half an hour? The ice pack is warm, right? Then you got to put it back in the freezer, or hopefully have another one. That's the same thing when it comes to coolant. So that's what coolant is. So you know about air cooled, which is just physically, air has to go over the engine to cool it down. If you look at a motorcycle engine, there's often fins on it, and that's to get more air there to cool it down. Otherwise, there's liquid cooled. So there's liquid cooled motorcycles, liquid cooled cars, and so what that is around the engine is something called a cooling jacket. So imagine there's like holes here. I'm making this up. This is not like exactly how it is, okay? Or like around here, there's holes, like around the engine block. There's holes here. And so through those holes can flow liquid. So what's gonna, here, let's, do you like this? I just got it today, so we'll see if I like it. So far it's not bad. I gotta figure out how to shoot it. Okay, this is very crudely drawn, obviously, very simplified version. I'm kind of showing you like a top-down version of the engine block. Okay, so these are like the 4 cylinders. This is an I4 engine, which means inline 4 cylinders. You have 4 cylinders, and these are going to be firing like this, like that, right? So they get hot. Around it, you have like a cooling jacket in which coolant can flow. This is the worst drawing ever, but it'll give you the idea, okay? This is called a radiator. Radiator. It has fins on it, and also there might be a fan behind it too. This is the radiator cap. Yeah, this is so crudely drawn, real mechanics are gonna get pissed off at me. But once we get funding, we'll do a proper episode in a garage with a car and all the visuals and all the graphics. This is just the best your papa can do for you right now. When you start the car, you'll look at the engine thermometer, which is inside the car, and you'll see it go up slowly. And then it settles off a little bit. Mine settles off a little bit higher than the halfway point. If you see it going up and up, somehow safely get off the road and kill the engine, okay? Because that's, you know, overheating. It should be right in the middle. But when you start a car in New England in the wintertime or in summertime in Los Angeles, whatever, sometimes they say to, you know, let the car run for like a few seconds or like a few minutes, whatever, get the fluids warmed up, get the engine warmed up. You know, what are they talking about here? This engine literally gets hot, and as it gets hot, certain fluids need to flow. So what we do is we have a fluid inside of our car called coolant. I should do it in blue because it's cool. Or I should do it in green because it's actually green usually. You can use water if you want. You can use water, but you should hopefully be in like a tropical climate, because the issue is water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, right? So if it's wintertime in New England, like I grew up, you're gonna have a frozen coolant. But if you have proper coolant, not only is it better for the engine, but it has, you know, antifreeze in it, so that the freezing point of that is a lot lower. So you should be in like northern Siberia for that to freeze. So that's the idea. It's just keeping it fluid at an even lower temperature. So the coolant, once you start the car, the coolant will flow through the coolant jacket, which is on the outside of the cylinders, so it's not actually going in the cylinders ever. There's a barrier there, and that is you cooling off the engine. Just like I said, if you were overheating and I wrapped a hose around you and I had, you know, cold water go through it, then you would probably cool off, but that water's never actually physically touching you. Yeah, so that it cools off the engine. So as the engine heats up, the coolant has to flow. As it flows around, what is cold coolant, because of, you know, laws of thermodynamics, it gets warmed up. Just like the ice pack I said will get warmed up after a little bit, right? So now that warm coolant has to go back and be recooled, right? So what it'll do is it'll go to what's called a radiator. That radiator has a bunch of fins on it to help the air cool it off. And it's like a pipe that snakes through it. I'm not sure if like the warm coolant goes to the top or to the bottom. There's a science to it. But as it's going through the radiator and it snakes around, it is getting cooled off, such that when it leaves the radiator, it's now going to be cold again, and then it can return to the engine to cool it off. So that's the flow there, okay? But there's a couple other things here. One thing is there's a thermostat here, and what that thermostat says is, say you're starting up your engine in the wintertime in New England. You don't need it to go travel the whole thing because it's already cold. The coolant is cold, so like it doesn't need to go the whole route, like the long circuit, to cool off. It could just go like a shorter circuit like this. So it'll, you know, flow like that until it reaches a certain temperature. I think 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure. But once it reaches a certain temperature where now it's getting you too warm, then this thermostat will open up and the flow will be going through the radiator so that it actually mixes. And the hotter it gets, the more of the radiator coolant you need, because you need, you know, the really cold, you need really cold coolant. So there are little things like this that are just, I mean, I think they're awesome. There's a shorter circuit, there's a longer circuit, depending on what the temperature of the coolant is, and that your thermostat opens up or closes or mixes it to get the right temperature of coolant for your engine based on how it's doing live. Like it's not you're guessing or anything like that. Based on how the coolant is doing live. So in the first minute you use it versus an hour in, versus how the weather outside changes, it'll warm up or cool down your coolant because it needs to be the right temperature to cool down the engine. That's why also there's a radiator fan here, because if you're stopped at like a red light for too long, or you're in Dallas in the middle of summertime, and even though it is flowing through the radiator, maybe it's still too hot. It's 109 degrees outside. So then you need the fan to even blow more air over it to help you cool this thing off, because like it is not getting cold enough. You see? So that's why coolant, there's several ways to make sure that it is the right temperature before it goes into the cooling jacket to cool off your engine. Otherwise your engine will overheat. Furthermore, coolant expands. So as it expands, the issue is this cap cannot be replaced by just any cap. It has to be a specific radiator cap, because in that cap, once that reaches a certain level of pressure, that cap will then open up to allow the coolant to drain over into another reservoir here, because the coolant itself expanded, so it has to go into that overflow reservoir. This is why, by the way, if you've been running your engine for a while and you come back to like a garage or whatever, don't open this cap right away, because then it's going to explode, because it's under a lot of pressure. It needs to come back to just a normal, you know, temperature, because when it's hot, it expands, and so it has to overflow if it reaches a certain level. Otherwise, it can stay here. Short circuit, long circuit. Okay, now a word from our sponsor. Just kidding, I don't have a sponsor. I don't even know what that means. Do people pay you or something your sponsor is your mom. Go ask your mom for $100. So this is the radiator system. This is what coolant is in your car. I think I told you everything about it so far. I mean, to like a basic level. Air cooled, liquid cooled, thermostat, the short circuit versus long circuit. Takes time to warm up. Oh, this is pretty interesting. When you want the cabin of the car to be warmed up, it's not magically starting a fire anywhere in your car. What it is it's taking the warm coolant and sending it to the inside of the cabin of your car. That's why in the middle of winter in New England, if you start the car, it takes 5 to 6 minutes for the engine to warm up enough for then the cabin to get heated up. But the first 5 minutes you're like that. So if you're taking your mom out, let the car warm up outside of the garage, not inside the garage, or we'll all die. Let the car warm up for 5 minutes before you throw her in there. Also make sure that the seat heaters are on and things like that, and you have a cup of coffee for her and all that good stuff, okay? Be a good host when it comes to your mother. But that's why, or some people have like a self-starting car, so they'll just, let it run for a few minutes. I just like to grip life by the hilt and just bear it. I think it's a lot of fun to feel the engine and just, I just like thinking about it. It's just a lot of fun for me. So, but that's why it takes a few minutes for the engine, for the actual cabin to warm up, because it is waiting for the heat from the coolant. So the engine has to be warm enough to warm up the coolant, and then that coolant has to bypass this and then go into the cabin. And similarly for your health, this is a lot like sweating. If you go out for a night of dancing, or you are out running, or you're at the gym, whatever, when you overheat, your body goes, hang on a second, we're getting too hot here. So we need to run some coolant, and that's a little bit of sweat. And if you have wind going over you as you sweat, you get even colder, because that's like AC in a way, right? And then you think about this for other animals. Can a horse sweat? I don't know. Let me know. I know the answer because I love horses, but let me know. Can a dog sweat? How does a dog cool off? What's a dog's radiator? Right? And the longer the tongue is out, I can tell when my dogs are over hot. It's coming out like crazy dog. But that's what a radiator is. It's a way to regulate the temperature of the thing that cannot exceed a certain temperature. And for you, when you're cold, you'll shiver, and that's to warm up, right? You're not randomly shivering. You're shivering to move your body to warm up. The car doesn't have anything like that, I don't think, but yeah. Okay, so we got some things we're solving here, right? How the radiator works, coolant system. Now you know how the basics of an engine works. It's just a piston firing, blah, blah, blah. Great. So that's, that's the flow of coolant into here. What else can I tell you about this? I don't know. Let's move on to, okay, you have the crankshaft spinning. So what does that mean? How do we get the tires to go, right? That's the goal here. We got to turn linear motion into rotational motion. Where should I draw this? Should I erase this? Yeah, this dry erase board isn't that bad, eh? I need to figure out if it actually looks good on camera. Watch me end up doing this whole episode again. Which I don't mind. I like talking about it. The light keeps reflecting. Where are we? Okay. So, what color should we use, baby girl? Should we use green? Forest green? Okay. So we have this engine block. This is from the side. I don't like that color. Do you? Yeah, it's too light. Yeah, look, I knew I was bad at art. I did not know I was this bad. This is the best I can do. We'll get some diagrams and stuff for you. This might be more of a detriment now than a learning experience for you. Okay, so inside of the engine block, This is for an i4 engine, inline 4. You have V6, V8, V12. There's so many different kinds of engine. I rode a BMW motorcycle that has a boxer engine, which I don't like. It goes from side to side, so like the piston's going from side to side. And so whenever you stopped at a light, when you hit the throttle, I always go to the side. And I'm like, yeah, that needs to be solved. Or at least I don't like it. I mean, like a lot of people have it, but I don't like it. So you have 4 pistons. They're firing at different times, all being controlled by the timing belt, which is over here. Timing belt with the double overhead cams. The cams are on top of it. The cam shafts, dual overhead cams, I mean, sorry. All the pistons with their rings, right? 2 compression rings, 1 oil ring. Oil's going up, being cleaned. This is all connected with a connecting rod to the crankshaft. This is the crankshaft right here, right? And there are off-center things on it that help make sure that the weight keeps going. You know, momentum keeps going. It keeps spinning. This is not connected to the center of it. It moves in such a way that it could freely flow. Okay, so where does all this energy go? Well, we have something called a flywheel. What is a flywheel? A flywheel essentially is just a very heavy wheel. It's a very heavy wheel, wide. The lever arm, we're going to have an episode about levers and leverage and why that's important for you, especially as a girl. Lever. So the lever arm here from the center out is a certain length, and it's long. It's a big, heavy fucking wheel. And why we have that, once again, we don't need that, but why we have that is because people notice, okay, this, your first iteration of this is, it's a start, your mission accomplished, we are moving forward. How do we make it less that I want to go throw up? So flywheel just, it's so heavy and so large that it carries the momentum and the inertia that the firing here is all doing. Similar to like a potter's wheel, when like your foot goes up and down to spin the potter's wheel, but the wheel kind of moves in like a fluid, stable motion. Like the energy of that wheel is not vroom, vroom, wheel, turn, turn, turn with each push of the. So it's a way to smooth out and even out the energy input. Otherwise, this is going then with each time you ride, if that directly is going to the wheel, sure, you're going forward, but you're going dun, 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 dun. And your missus is not going to want to go get ice cream with you, right? That's not very fun. The baby's going to wake up, the dogs are going to be like, get me out of here. So a flywheel smooths out that energy so that the is now being spun in a more smooth way, where the energy is not spiking, it's more smooth and even. And that flywheel gets attached to the, where are we? Can you see all this? So here the flywheel is connected to the transmission. And the transmission, this is a gearbox. It contains different gears and a clutch and like a differential, I believe. And I forget exactly what's legally in a gearbox versus a transmission, but there's a differential and there's a final drive, things like that. But the science behind what we're doing here is this energy needs to go to the wheel, right? Because we have this wheel moving under a lot of power, a lot of strength, a lot of momentum and inertia. So what we do is we can send it straight to the wheel, that's fine, but that's a lot of energy that isn't being smoothed out. So again, if you want, you can directly go send it to the wheel. But then as we notice later, layer by layer, we go, how do we make this more smooth, more fun, more fuel efficient, more safe, things like that. That's off the top of my head. I believe this is the equation. And what that means is this. These are different gears from the side. Notice that they also have a different length of lever arm, like a length of, radius. So this radius longer than this radius, smaller, smaller, smaller. So what you're gonna have there, this is like a big wheel with a bunch of your teeth on it. There's a, I believe it's called a gear ratio. I should have researched this. There's a gear ratio which says how many rotations this makes versus this gear. For example, if this made, I mean, you could probably hazard a guess here. If this made one full rotation, this would probably make a lot of rotations. It might be like a ratio of, and I'm just going to make this up, like 100 to 1. So this spins 100 times for every one this does. But this might be 2 to 1. So for every one rotation this does, this spins twice. Okay, Bing Bong. Sorry, a lot of interruptions. So what's happening here is, if you're going from rest, say you're, in the garage, and you're at 0 velocity, no moving momentum, you're at rest, right? An object in rest wants to stay at rest unless acted on by an outside force. Your boy Isaac Newton, weirdo. 1666, during the plague. Principia Mathematica. Died celibate, I think with mercury poisoning. Invented calculus, discovered optics, gravitational forces of heavenly bodies, all by 24. Show off. So it takes a lot of energy. It takes the most energy to move an object that's at rest into motion. But then once it starts moving, now it has this momentum. Now it's a little bit easier to keep it going or to add more speed to it. And it gets easier with each mile per hour. An example of that is like if you try to push me from rest now, you have to put your back into it. But if I'm already moving and then you're walking up behind me, you can probably give me like a couple of flicks just to keep me going with just your hand like this. But if I'm at rest, you got to be like, all right, Dad, let's move. That's the idea there. So from rest in the beginning, you need a lot of power. That's called first gear, because the first gear is the closest in ratio to the flywheel. See how it's the largest? In the second gear, the radius or the lever arm gets smaller, 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 smaller. So this is like fifth gear, because you're going. So when you start at 0 miles an hour, you engage first gear. Then maybe you get to 5-10 miles an hour, you're at second gear. 10-20 miles an hour, now you're moving to 30, about 30 miles an hour or so, whatever. You'll have a feel for that car, I hope. Fourth gear, as you're at 40, 50, even 60 miles an hour, okay, whatever. Fifth gear. And some cars, I think mine goes up to 6. I think your grandfather's goes up to 9. So it's just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it's being more efficient with the power, with the velocity, with the torque, and with the fuel, by the way, because this takes a lot of fuel. This takes far less. If you're on a highway going 70, you don't need to be on first gear. That's why if you're on first gear and you're going 70, you'll hear the engine going vroom, because the RPM is trying to. It's like a big wheel to move, So you shouldn't be there. So this gives you the most power, first gear, and the ratio gets more extreme as you go up in gear. But this is more suitable for higher velocities because you have more momentum, more inertia. So it's less hard to move you or to advance your speed. I think this is the equation. There's a finite amount of power that the car can yield. So either this has to go up or this has to go down to match this. So on a low gear, you get very low velocity, but you get a lot of torque, a lot of your power there. The ability to move is there, like the strength is there, but the velocity will be low. Then as you go up, these are very low torque gears. So if it's low torque, then you can get high velocity, going 60 miles an hour or so. And if you want to pause here, you meditate on it, or just answer this question later, or just skip past the answer as I ask you. This is like the field test that we do. We'll talk about your field test later, like about your consciousness, and if you have a dog in front of a mirror with an X on it, or an elephant and human consciousness and all that stuff. But there's a field test you can do, which is this. If you're on a road and you're trying to overtake the car in front of you, say you can shift your gears. It's not an automatic car, or it's an automatic car where you can shift the gears like mine is. And I will teach you how to drive a manual. You should learn. It's a lot of fun. And if you're going to ride a motorcycle, you have to know it. You don't have to, because my Vespa was not, but that's also not a motorcycle. But you should learn how to drive a manual. We'll make all the mistakes together. If you want to overtake a car, so he's going 45, the highway says 65, and you want to be at speed, so you want to overtake him. You're in fourth gear, okay, behind him. Fourth gear behind him. What do you have to do to pass him? If you want, you can pause here. I'll give a hint, and then you can repause, or whatever you want. I don't know how to do this when you're not here. But what do you want to do to pass him? So this is like a mental thing where like you should like take your time to kind of think about like what the goal is, what you're trying to do, and so what you need. Most people get the wrong answer here. If you want to pass him, one thing is you should do it as safely, as quickly as possible. Get as close as you can behind him while being safe, and then get as short time as possible, go around him, just because there may be oncoming traffic, it may be dark, and things like that. Also, he may be a jerk who then think, oh well, then he'll add this speed and be competitive. It's so silly, these humans out there. But you want to make that move as safely and as efficiently as you can. So what you need there is what? You need a lot of power to pass them. You should not just slowly be gliding past them. Like, you want to get that dangerous task with as safely and as soon as you can. So if you need more power, what gear should you be shifting to from fourth gear? Most people, because they answer too quickly and just they don't think about it, they say fifth gear, because they think the higher the number means the more power. Look, I'm in fifth gear now. There's more power, but that's not the case. You want to downshift from 4 to 3 or from 4 to 2. And you'll hear the engine go because you're at a speed where it doesn't want to go down to here, but there's a lot of your power there. So your speed will go down, but if you give more gas, now you have the torque, you can increase the velocity and you get more power to overtake them fast. So you want to downshift safely. You don't want to go from 4 to 1 like that. That's going to damage the engine, but you at least want to go like 1 gear down. Then you get a lot of your power behind there. If you're going uphill, I mean, your car will automatically do this if it's automatic, but you'll downshift to go uphill. Furthermore, if you're going downhill, you can also downshift to add an engine brake, but we'll talk about all that later. And does that make sense? So that's a field test we ask everybody to overtake someone. What gear should you be shifting to? And that's just a test to see if you understand why we have gears there. You don't need any of these. You could just go with the flywheel directly. Okay, but that's a lot of power and the low velocity, so you want to have a ratio to smooth that out for you. This is called a transmission. And maybe because it's going to transmit the power to the wheel. I'm not sure actually what the etymology is behind transmission. I would assume so. And there's a clutch, which we'll talk about in another episode, and that's basically connecting the engine to the transmission, because you don't want that to go in right away. So there's in an automatic car, there's an automatic clutch. In a standard car, you are controlling the clutch, and that's basically saying as you have an energy at as you have an engine at high speed, you can't just go dump that speed onto a stagnant wheel, right? Because the wheel's not moving yet. And if your engine's going like this, then you can't just go and now connect, because then you'll jump, boom. That's why you'll see somebody dump the clutch, which is just them letting it go right away, so it connects it right away. Then you got to give gas, because that's forcing the wheels to go, and that's why you see all these kids doing burnouts and stuff, which I used to do when I sold cars in a Mustang. you can do your burnouts and all this stuff. That's you dumping the clutch to get the wheels like that going, and you get all the smoke and things like that. Also, if you want to pop the clutch to start a dead car that doesn't have a battery working, I can show you how to do that too. You got to have some momentum, go into second gear, dump the clutch, and that starts the car. Well, yeah, so there's so many cool things to learn there. Anyway, okay, now this is very crudely drawn. Okay, this transmission. So this whole thing all together is called a powertrain, I believe. Okay, powertrain. This is the engine plus the transmission. Okay. And it goes to the wheels. Inside of here is something called a differential. And I wish a part of learning that, the part of learning that I love most is discovery. I already lost a cap. The part of learning I love most is discovery. So if you don't want to watch any of these, that's cool, because it's more fun to me for you to imagine, wait a second, what about this problem, and then see how we solved it. But so you can stop if you want, but we have something called a differential, and all that means is, say your car is front wheel drive. That means that the front wheels have the power, the rear wheels are just following, which is a good design for safety, by the way, because then the car is under tension and not compression. We can talk about that later. My car is a rear wheel drive, which is, I love it, but it's harder in wintertime with slick roads and things like that, because you're driving from the back. So it's like if you take a shopping cart and you pull it from the front, it'll always go with you, right? But if you push it from the back, it'll kind of go like this a little bit. So you have to have your two hands on it to make sure it goes. That's the difference there between rear wheel drive and front wheel drive regarding safety. And the car's under, it's either being pulled in tension, or it's under compression, which is that the butt's moving forward. Okay. But the differential says this. Say you have a front wheel drive car and you have the energy going towards the wheels, right? From the engine to the transmission, and now it's going to the wheels. It's called final drive, I think. If you're taking a turn, do you already recognize a problem here? If you're taking a turn, This is like a top view of your tires. So you're gonna go to the right. And so this wheel turns this much. Well, this wheel turns this much. Say this is 5 feet, and this is 25 feet. Oh boy, I'm not even on camera. This is 5 feet, this is 25 feet. So that left wheel needs to be turning a lot more, yeah? That's what a differential is. It's giving a different amount of power, like it's allowing that wheel to turn longer because it knows that you're taking a right turn. So it's not giving the same power and the same gear ratio, I believe, to each tire. Otherwise, it's gonna skid, I believe. Like if you have like a trike bike, like a bike with like a sidecar, you'll see the wheel, dragging, but it needs to be rolling, not dragging. So that's just what a differential is. A differential is giving, it's allowing the wheel that needs to have a longer path to take longer. Otherwise, if it's the same amount of energy for both, it's going to be dragging or short. Okay? Yeah, I'm trying to see what I forgot here. Does that make sense so far? You got the pistons firing, you know about the valves, dual overhead cam, where are we? It's the engine block, I4 engine, 4 pistons, 2 compression rings, 1 oil ring, oil comes up, it fires, spark plug, valves, right? 2 intake valves, 2 exhaust valves, all controlled by cams, which are on a cam shaft. This is a dual overhead cam because there's 2 of them. That energy connects through a connecting rod to a crank shaft. This is the shaft. This is all in line, in sync with a timing belt. So this is connected with like a physical belt. This has something off center to make sure that it keeps going. All that energy goes to a flywheel to even out the amount of energy, like the smoothness of that energy. That energy goes to the transmission. Inside the transmission is a gearbox which regulates how much energy we're sending based on what you need at that time. Are you an object at rest or are you in motion? Do you need more power? Do you need to overtake? Things like that. And so we don't waste gas too, and we have the ride be smoother too. I think based on this equation, you gotta double check that. Gear ratios based on the size of it, and the size of it is just the length of the radius, which is like a lever arm essentially. That power goes to the wheels through the axle, through a differential. This is all part of the transmission. So it gets different amounts of energy there. Okay, I'm gonna stop here and dump this disc, and what is left? Oh, we gotta talk about the starter motor, because how does this even start? The battery, what happens when you put the key in or you hit the fob or whatever? What else we gotta talk about? The alternator, the solenoid, the wound copper wires, magneto, rotors, stator, the muffler, the catalytic converter, the Clean Energy Act, 1975. What else am I forgetting? Brakes, rotors, yeah, we'll talk about all that, like the e-brake, and then a little bit about lights and safety and all that stuff, but that's all extra. I'm just trying to show you the basis of how the hell to get a car to even go, right? All right. In case I continue this tomorrow, I love you and I love you, but I'm gonna see if I have more energy after I dump this. I'm gonna take a break. Alrighty. Think about it over life. Maybe it's boring to you at some point, maybe not. But when you start a car, this is all happening. Great men and women have been working on this for a long time, adding layer by layer by layer, and then you get a product. And now you know why it's working in a certain way. Furthermore, when you see some moron, floor it, all that stuff, you know what's going on there, because this is all moving at a high rate of speed. I mean, it is, going, RPMs. I think that's the rotations per minute of the crankshaft. So when it says 1, which is we that's 1,000 rotations for each minute. If you're up to 6, 7, whatever, and you're redlining, that thing is going. And we can't have one time this valve be off. We can't have one time the oil end up in the chamber, or you see white smoke. You'll see smoke out of the muffler. That means that the oil's in the chamber. And so there are things that I know about. When I hear the car or whatever, I go, hey, your timing belt has an issue. Or, hey, you got oil in the thing, and the person doesn't know. Or you hear you knocking if you use the wrong fuel, things like that. But I know. Or guys who like engineering and cars know. But yeah. Or if you need new brakes, all this stuff. I've warned a lot of people who didn't know about their cars, old ladies or whatever. And I go, hey, honey, you need a new this because this is scraping. And she goes, oh my God, I didn't know. So, all right. Yes, this is all going at a high rate of speed, and the valve's got to go with the cams going to the timing belt just to get your butt to you know, ballet practice or whatever. All right, I'm gonna take a break. I love you and I love you. See you in a bit. Bye. Yo, we're back. Made some mistakes here. So as Feynman says, if you can't teach it, you don't know it. And you could probably sense there was some confusion here with this equation. And let's see if I know it now. But essentially, this is rotational velocity, and that leads to a max velocity that the car can output. The idea here is that as your car, the RPMs, rotations per minute, is how often the crankshaft is spinning per minute. So if it's at idle, say at 1,000 RPM or 1.5 RPM, that's 1,000 rotations a minute. But there's a redlining area in my car, I think it's 6,000, which is when it's not good for the actual engine. So regarding these gear ratios, and I just made these numbers up, but the gear ratio allows you to get more torque out of these lower end gears, like first gear, second gear. And it's at the expense of the rotational velocity. You get more torque at the expense of the rotational velocity being less. So there's a max, so it's like how much this wheel can spin, this gear can spin. As you can tell, I'm still not 100% on it, but that's okay. We're always learning. This is how you learn. You learn. There's a moment where you don't know stuff, and then you learn about it, and you let it wash over you over time, over years. You learn more and more and more, and you get a better understanding of it. So I like keeping the stuff in because it shows you that I'm learning. There was a moment where I had an accountant who I loved. His name is Murray, and he noticed that I was in a bit of a panic, and he said, Jake, no one knows more than you. They may be older, so they've had more time to learn things, but they were not born knowing more than you. At some point, everybody had to learn something. And I think that was one of the best lessons I ever heard, or reminders at least. When you're at rest and you need to go from 0 miles an hour to motion, the crankshaft will be spinning. You'll add some gas, and the ratio between the flywheel, it's not exactly that the flywheel's hooking up directly to the gearbox, but the rotation of the flywheel as it spins will, say, move this first gear only half a turn, for example. But you get a lot of torque out of this one because it's a larger gear. It has a longer radius, a longer lever arm, so you get more torque out of this one. But it'll only spin maybe half of a complete rotation, or like a quarter of a rotation. Then as you speed up and the crankshaft starts to spin more and the RPM starts to go up, you can upshift into second gear, which has a smaller lever arm, a smaller radius. You get less torque out of it, but then the crankshaft needs to spin less because you're not looking for that much torque because you're already in motion, and it keeps continuing all the way up. So when you're in fifth gear, for every one rotation this spins, this is going to be spinning a lot because the gear ratio is, say this has 30 teeth and this has 6 teeth or something like that. The gear ratio is a lot different here than here. So for every one rotation, this will spin a lot, but the RPMs here can now stay low, well within, like 1,000 to 3,000 RPMs to maintain your speed of, 50 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, because you don't need that much torque to maintain your speed at that rate. But here you need a lot of torque because you're starting from 0. So they're going to give you a big gear with a big beefy lever arm, like a long lever arm, and a long radius. And for every one rotation here, this one may only be spinning half a rotation. And that's because of the gear ratio. There's a max, output for each one. That's why you keep shifting to the next one, because you need less torque and because it's going to be bad for the engine. But we can go more into that more exactly later as I feel more confident explaining it in a coherent manner. Just know that this is why, so if, like I said, if you're in fourth gear and you're looking to overtake someone, now you need more power, more torque. So what you do is you downshift from fourth to third gear, or your fourth to second gear, or whatever, and you'll hear the engine go vroom, because now the crankshaft is going to be spinning at a higher rate, RPM. So it goes up. And so to maintain that sort of speed, it needs to be moving this a lot faster. And then when you give gas, you get a lot of torque here, and then you're going to hear the engine go vroom, because you need that sort of power. Like, that's not a warning sign, that's you getting more power. But you don't want to stay there. This is just for the moment of you trying to overtake someone, which takes just a few seconds. Yeah, but you don't want to stay there. And then when you want to increase your speed, you want to upshift again. Otherwise, if you stay here and you floor it, you'll be redlining you'll be redlining, past, 6,000 RPM, and that's not great for the engine. That's a little bit of clarification on the why we need gears. I hope that made sense. If it doesn't, I'll do another video on it where it's even more clear. And I can show you some examples. Okay, but here, when you think about it, how does the engine even start, right? So you're at rest, you hop in the car is off, it's at rest, nothing's moving. So how do we even start the car? How do things get going? When you put the key in and you turn, what's happening? When you have the fob on, I don't have my fob on me, and then you press the button, what's happening there? Well, you have a starter motor here. And that starter motor has a little gear that comes out with a couple of teeth. Yeah. And then you have a battery. Well, I can put the battery over here, okay? This is like a 12-volt battery. So this has stored energy in it. And when you put the key in the ignition, that battery is going to connect to like a relay that then gives power to this starter motor. And this starter motor will move out this little gear, this little wheel with teeth, to engage the flywheel. And there's a solenoid in here that triggers that, but we can go into more detail in another episode. And so this comes out, this little gear with teeth, and it engages this flywheel. And that little gear with teeth will then go, which starts to spin the flywheel. The flywheel goes, and then as soon as it hits a certain speed, it triggers this to go back in. So now this is all done. It's just there for a moment. That's why when you start the car, you hear that part is the battery engaging the starter motor to have this come out and start the flywheel. And then the flywheel starts with its own momentum, and now everything starts to move. Yeah. So this is taking a lot of energy. It's like a big power suck, like a lot of amps from the 12-volt battery. And its use is done in a few seconds. Mind you, for the first couple of cars, you'd be doing this by hand. So like when I said, what are the basics you need for a car? You don't need this, you could do it by hand. But then layer by layer, people are like, well, I don't want to go outside and start this car by hand. And then they came up with things like this. Yeah. And so the problem there is once you start the car, this uses up a lot of energy. And now the 12-volt battery is not quite as strong as it once was. So how do we recharge the battery? Well, there's something called an alternator. Inside of that alternator is something called a rotor, which is just spinning magnets. You'll see a bunch of magnets, and that's surrounded by coiled wire. It's like housed in coiled wire. So when the rotor inside of it spins, according to Faraday's law, and we'll go through all the scientific discovery by this, if you chop a magnetic field, because these are magnets inside, if you chop a magnetic field with a wire, or if the magnet spins and the wires are still, whichever way you want to do it, you create electricity. Electricity starts to flow. Okay, so that's the beauty of a solenoid. Of an alternator or a generator. And you can even do this at home with a magnet and a wire, and you'll see the graph going up as you cut the magnetic field with a wire. It's actually like a beautiful thing in science when you think about it. I believe that's Faraday's law. So as this not magneto, in an airplane, when we fly, I'll show you, we have magnetos there. When this rotor spins, which is full of magnets, spins and is surrounded by the copper wire, that's now generating electricity, which then replenish the supply of energy in here. So as you start the engine, like a full battery maybe comes down to here. So now this needs to be refilled. And then as this spins, this is now replenishing the energy until it goes back up and it's all the way full again. It takes maybe 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so of driving. And if you are idling, it takes longer. If you're driving at a high speed, it's a lot shorter. So this is called an alternator. It's turning AC current into DC. Remember, DC, I'll explain in another episode. DC is a battery. AC is like the electricity that you get from a wall socket. Alternating current versus DC, that basically means that the electricity flows one way or it goes one way and back and forth. This is AC. This is DC. Put all this in another episode, don't worry about it right now. And then there's like a rectifier and all these things to make sure that once it's topped off, you can stop essentially. And as things are being used in the car, like your lights, your radio, whatever electronics you have on board, things that need to move, that's going to be supplied by the battery, which is getting replenished by the gasoline. So the dinosaurs that died made the fuel. The fuel is charging up the battery, and it's all being used to replenish energy in one sense or another so that you can go, right? This is also how on a standard car you can dump the clutch in second going downhill or with some motion, and you can engage the clutch right away to get this going if your battery's already dead. I can show you how to do that too. I've helped a lot of people do that. I helped that most recently when I was in India. I was like abandoned on Wellington Island. I was hoping that the guy would give me a ride. So we push started his motorcycle, and he dumped the clutch. It started. He's like, all right, thank you, see ya. I was like, I was hoping to get a ride in the back, but that's okay. That's the most recent time I did it. Alternator, battery, this is how it works inside. Turning AC into DC so it can be stored. It's all coming from the engine, you know, the pistons, all this stuff, why we have transmission, the differential. It's all called the powertrain. Yeah? Yeah. This is also why we say, you know, if you're starting the car several times without a long drive, say you started, then you drive 100 feet, you started, then you drive 1,000 feet, you started, then you know, I'm not sure why you're doing this, but you're going from stop to stop to stop to stop. What's going to happen is this will keep depleting without getting a chance to recharge. And if it doesn't recharge, then maybe by the you're making up a number, by the 6, 7, 8, 9 time, it won't start anymore because it never had a chance to replenish the battery, the 12-volt battery. I like to think of this when you're waking up in the morning, right? While you sleep, your energy is not at zero. You have stored energy. Then you wake up, that's like the starter motor. You just get up because there's stored energy there. And then you replenish it throughout the day with food, right? But when you wake up, you're not at zero energy such that you can't wake up. You'd be dead. So there's a starter motor there. And sometimes in life, as a good metaphor, you need to be the starter motor for other people, for like a community, for a group, just to kind of get the energy going. And then everything starts firing. Also, regarding energy, you know, this is using gasoline, you know, 87 octane, I think, 89, 91 octane, 93, like that. My car takes Supreme, which I think is 93 or 91, which is just about, you know, high performance vehicles. There's something called knocking, so you don't want to use the wrong fuel. We'll go into all that later. But there's different kinds of fuel. One is called diesel fuel. And the uniqueness of that fuel, which is named after Rudolf Diesel, I believe, who created the diesel engine, and also the fuel is named after him, who also died mysteriously and tragically. And it might have been a conspiracy, by the way, how he died, I think on a ship or something like that. We can go into that in a bit. But a diesel engine, the uniqueness is there are no spark plugs. Oh geez, there are no spark plugs. You don't need this in a diesel engine. Why? What we've discovered is when you compress diesel fuel to a certain level, it'll automatically combust because it gets so hot that it'll automatically ignite. So you don't actually need a spark plug there. And it's a different ratio on different engines. Some are 8-to-1, some I think are 17-to-1, which is basically if you have 17 liters compressed into 1 liter, then it automatically ignites. That's a diesel engine, and you can always hear a diesel engine, and there's pros and cons to both diesel engine versus not, regarding your cleanliness and all that stuff of the engine. Okay, put a little spark plug back there. All right, let's talk about the exhaust, right? As we said here, all this has to go somewhere, and it's going to go away as smoky, dirty, toxic smoke. Okay, so we have this exhaust that comes out of the engine, and that's going to go into the air. So it'd be nice not to breathe this dirty, toxic air, right? So if this is the engine block, as the exhaust comes out, it can go straight out. You can, cut it here and go release it into the environment, but you don't want to do that. So, and also it's very loud, by the way. This engine is extremely loud, like scary loud, right? Sometimes you want that for safety. On my motorcycle, I took out the baffle because I like that sound. It just sounds good. And sometimes that's a safety thing. I know everyone hates when a motorcyclist goes by, all that stuff, because it seems like an ego thing, which it often is, but it's also a safety thing because it's hard to see a motorcyclist and they're easy to hit. So they're trying to like warn you, I'm here with this loud engine versus a car, which you can see more easily and more readily. So the noise is even a warning to be like, I'm here, heads up. There's even a sound requirement. Sometimes for these electric cars, they were so quiet that blind people were getting hurt. They were getting hit by the car. So then there's a law that required the car make a certain decibel of noise. And that's for safety. So this is how, layer by layer, we try to figure things out to make it safer and all that stuff. And government gets involved in like the few times that it's actually useful to help out with things like this. Otherwise, some people wouldn't do it because they'll say, well, I'm not blind, it's not an issue. But for the blind person, they're like, I can't go walk around my community because I didn't know there's a car there. Usually they make noise, but now I don't hear it. So the muffler. This is the muffler, as is indicated in the name. It muffles the sound, right? And so there's baffles in here, and there are some pipes that are there to dampen the sound. When we talk about sound later and sound waves, longitudinal versus transverse waves, if you have a wave like that, but you also have a wave like this, they will cancel each other out. So this cancels each other out. This is, there's a node and anti-node, and this will finally cancel each other out to nothing. But if you have it on the same wavelength, like this is the sound, and this is the space allowed inside the muffler, it'll actually amplify it and resonate. This will become double the size in terms of sound. We'll go into all this in the sound episode, but that's how the muffler is designed to actually just quiet down the amount of noise coming out of the engine finally. That's why these cars sound like a decent level, because there's a destructive interference inside of here that negate the sound. It kills the sound as much as it can. Okay? And then this is called a catalytic converter. This was created and enacted by the 1975 or 1970 Clean Air Act, back seemingly when government did their job. And it's basically saying if we have all these cars on the road, we can't have everyone just emitting whatever they want into the ozone, into the atmosphere. It'll pollute the atmosphere. There'll be a hole in the ozone layer from chlorofluorocarbons, I believe it is, CFCs, and things like that. So we have laws that help. And so what they discovered is you can create a catalytic converter which will clean up the air before it even goes out of the car. Not to get too dark, but I want you to have interdisciplinary knowledge and see how everything connects. The catalytic converter has these three rare, precious, and by that I mean expensive, metals in it: platinum, palladium, and rhodium. And so really horrible, evil people will go under a car and they'll cut this out to go get the catalytic converter to go sell on the black market to chop shops. And it's very bad, it's very sad, it's very tragic. You and I will just study like the economics of it and know that there's a backstory for everything. Whoever's doing this, it's because they need the money, but that doesn't justify this at all. Obviously, I can do it, but I don't do it. And that's about economics. But tragically, there is an actor who's like a good actor, working actor, and around very handsome, good-looking white guy. Very handsome, good-looking, tall white guy, and at like 3 or 4 a.m. in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, he went out to his car, and there were 3 thieves under his car who were trying to cut the catalytic converter. He confronted them, and they shot him to death. And that story really affects me because I know everything about that world, what he's going through, the work he's done. He's out there. I think he was with a girl, making sure she's safe. Like I know about these thieves. I know what they're trying to do. I get it. And I just for this overlap to happen, it's just very disgusting, deplorable, tragic. Those words don't even start to cover like the magnitude of wrong that went on there. So this needs to stop. Don't I'll teach you about defense and what to do in like the safety episode, but yeah, I wish he was alive. Anyway, catalytic converter has these precious metals. That's why people have been chopping him up. I was literally at the spot he was at a week before he was, so, and I had noted how it seems a lot safer than it was, and then that happened a week after. All right, regarding the sound from the muffler and from the engine, any of these problems we notice, we try to find solutions for. Sometimes the physics doesn't allow it. Another episode we'll talk about the Concorde, which is a supersonic commercial jet that I loved growing up, but I never got to experience. It's $10K for like a ticket. It goes like Mach 2 or something like that. It could have your flying time from New York to London in 3 hours versus 6 hours, which I could find very useful because if it went from New York to Los Angeles, I make that trip a lot, and I would love it if that was only 3 hours. But the problem is when it when it goes past the speed of sound, there's a sonic boom. And that sonic boom, the problem was that would go down to everyone on the ground level. So they would hear like 2 sonic booms every time a Concorde is landing or taking off. So that's why you're not allowed to fly the Concorde, you weren't allowed to fly the Concorde over the contiguous US. You could only do it over the oceans. Furthermore, as the plane was slowing down or taking off, they would have to kill speed over the ocean and then come in for entry to LaGuardia or JFK because they can't do the sonic boom over land. So it's funny how engineering tied with complaints, tied with your government and then laws and all these things, it's then we rumble towards like a solution, hopefully. So with the car them being so loud, they're like, we need a way to make this quieter because this is unlivable. So they made a muffler. Then regarding emissions, they go, we can't pollute everything. So then we have a 1975 Clean Air Act. So then they made a catalytic converter. Then there are ramifications for that because of these precious metals. People are having theirs stolen. People are getting shot. It's just, so you always keep finding solutions. If you can find a solution for the catalytic converter, that'd be great. And also that Clean Air Act didn't cover motorcycles, lawnmowers, things like that, because that has emissions, but it's not scaled as much as a 4-wheel car is. So those aren't being regulated because there's far fewer mopeds, motorcycles, lawnmowers, and all that stuff. So it's allowed. But if everyone is always riding a lawnmower everywhere or riding a motorcycle everywhere, then they might start enacting that law. So somewhere like Taiwan or in a lot of the Eastern Hemisphere where the 2-wheeler is the main source of transportation, then they might be like, well, we need a catalytic converter on this. Okay. Then of course, because you don't want the misses bouncing around too much, you have shocks and suspension and struts on the wheel. I'll show you how to change your tire. It's not hard. There's the wheel, there's a tire, it connects with an axle, shocks, spring coil, and that's all, and struts. That's all just to make your ride more comfortable. Otherwise you'd be like this, feeling every little rock and pebble, right? Let alone your potholes and things like that. So we have this to make it a little bit easier for you to glide and feel more like you're on a cloud. And so nicer cars, like if you drive like an old Cadillac, feels like you're on your bed floating. It's just nice. That's luxury. It's expensive because of that, because all the pieces are expensive and state-of-the-art, but then you get the best ride. So it depends regarding your business. Do you want a car that everybody can have? Then you make a Honda Civic, make a Toyota Camry, Toyota Corolla. It does the job. It gets you from point A to B safely. It's reliable, it's efficient, and you keep increasing reliability, efficiency, all these things. And then like the luxury stuff is just as an amateur engineer or like a wannabe engineer, it's just more things that can go wrong. There are more motors and more parts. But okay, if you enjoy that, you enjoy that. But the way we think here is just the basics, which is does it get you there? Does it do the job? That's what I'm looking for here. And so I love all cars. Like I love Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Maybach, all those cars. I think they're awesome, beautiful, luxurious, and engineering marvels. But I also just love like a basic beater car because I know like the components and it's a lot of fun. I love a go-kart. I love a golf cart. I love mopeds, old Vespas, things like that. I even love like lawnmower engines or snowblower engines. I just love engines. I just love thinking about it all. When you use a lawnmower and then you go like this, see now you're the starter motor there, right? So now we can make comparisons here. And also when we talk about airplanes more, we'll analyze airplane engines, how that's designed differently, right? I think it's called Continental. I forget, it's been a while. And so the pistons will be different, set up different, but the crankshaft will be here to help with the propeller. Don't you quote me on that, it's been a while. And then when we talk more about sailing, there's a motor there too. That's usually a diesel engine, like a Volvo diesel engine. Now you know about diesel. Or you'll have like an outboard engine, which is gasoline. So, and there's different safety measurements for all that stuff too. Alrighty, engines, just the ability to go. That's what we're talking about here. Shocks, struts. Oh, you want to talk about brakes real quick? Brakes, so there's anti-lock brakes, which essentially is that it's braking like this. What that does is, in the moment that it's not braking, it's allowing the car to keep staying straight. But if you just had it clamped down on the wheel, then it has the ability to fishtail and to not be straight. So sometimes you give up the braking distance so that you're going straight versus I braked in a shorter amount of time, but I'm in a completely different lane. How to know that your brakes are getting low, not just by feel, but there's a piece of metal that when you hear that, that's now metal on metal, so you should be getting your brakes done. And like an e-brake, at least in some of the old basic cars, are just a brake for the back wheel. So if you have a front wheel drive car and you lift the e-brake, you are now manually engaging the brakes in the back wheel just to keep it even more sturdy. Yeah, e-brake, braking, suspension, shocks. Anything we didn't cover, this is just a basic thing. So with each episode, we'll keep going down into like the details and all this stuff. You know, a lot of this is not exactly how it works. So I can show you more specifically, like the flywheel's not directly engaged to the gears, you know, things like that. There are, what's it called? There's a thing I want, like a turbine. There's so many parts we can talk about, but this is the basics. The more about safety, the airbags, the seat belt, the window. There used to be, you know, hard knobs, and those hard knobs would not be, you know, forgiving, so the hard knob would go into somebody's head, so they would make the knobs different. And I think Ralph Nader was in charge of a lot of the safety regarding transportation, which, you know, people see as, you know, lame or whatever, but then it's like, this is why you're alive, dude. I want there to be like a breathalyzer test for cars, so that if it detects that you're blowing above a 0.08, it just doesn't start. So now the decision is removed from you, and we kind of covered that on the alcohol episode. And there's a lot of issues with that regarding freedoms, and then, you know, stupid people will say, yeah, but how about if I get my other friend to do it? It's like, dude, just, you know, think like an engineer. These are like obvious questions that we can solve. It's like, you can find a problem for everything, you know? When somebody starts to like invent something, there's always these idiots, and it's like the vast majority, because they can't envision the future. They're not seeing the things that never were and asking why not. They're seeing the things that are and asking why, whatever the RFK quote is that I always say. So there's always those people. When we go through 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, you know, there's always those people that have their doubt, and they go, no, you know, we have a, you know, horse and buggy. You know, this is fine. Who wants to ride in that thing? Look, it's a monstrosity. It's loud. It's not safe. Blah blah blah. Like, it requires gas. It's too expensive. But the innovators and the businessmen and the clairvoyant will be like, no, wait, like, there's a way to make this better and better and better until it hits, like, almost like a critical mass where now it can scale, and then everyone wants one. This is the same way with when Netflix came out, when data phones came out, when like the internet came out, when computers came out. By the way, we'll do a whole episode on how computers work. It's awesome. There's always the doubters, and they are many. So just don't focus on them. That's why if you start a company, you're just finding a small group of like-minded people, because these people you don't really have to explain it to. They're not wondering, well, we don't have this yet, this is really stupid. They're wondering, wait, then if it is stupid, how can I make it better fast? So then they're thinking in that way. How it used to be, and mind you that, you know, cars were only have only been around for some, you know, 120 years. From that, then you get to fly a plane and all these things. But furthermore, even if you go to like a brownstone in New York, why those steps are like that is because it used to be a horse and buggy area. So then horses would just, you know, die in the street or defecate in the street. So if you're wealthy, like, to be above it, you at least can rise above the feces and the dead bodies, rotting bodies of horses everywhere, and then it gets a lot cleaner, right? So there's always the doubters. They go, you look at that monstrosity, until finally everyone's like, that's amazing, I want one, right? So this is how you think in terms of innovation. Don't try to prove it to these people that can't imagine things. You're just wasting your breath, wasting your time. Do not waste your time on this. It's exhausting. Just work with smart, like-minded people who have a vision. They are out there. I'm not sure where they are, but they are out there, and I hope to meet them. But don't waste your time trying to convince people that can't imagine things. One of your greatest strengths is imagination. So, all right, honey. We'll go into later episodes about how this equates to health, because like I'll have an example about like a Jeep Wrangler, which all chicks love, Jeep Wrangler. I want to get to the bottom of what exactly they're loving there, but I do get it, versus like a Toyota Corolla. And if we put them on rollers at 40 miles an hour and we let that go for 20 years, would a car break down first? So that's same conditions, same everything's, no bumps, nothing, and like a steady stream of gas. Would one car break down earlier than another? If so, why? And so then we'll compare this to longevity and health and death. You know, people use these, you know, interfaces now to like describe health problems or how people die. He died of old age. There is no medical condition called old age. There has to be, it's a causal thing. There has to be something going wrong. That's the beauty of engines and engineering, is that there's no magic here. It is like literally just a causal relationship where something happens, so something else happens. The same with computer systems, software, engineering, all this stuff. There's a reason. Like, there's no magic. There's no there's no miracle here. Sometimes we can't even explain the science of it, but we know that it's working because of a certain reason. This happens a lot regarding quantum mechanics, where we haven't quite defined as clearly as we want to quantum mechanics, but we can see that it is working due to certain devices working, so we can see it. Anyway, more into that later, but there's no magical thing here. Everything's happening for a reason, and they're all built by people who imagine, well, then what if we have this here, but what if we put a spring here, but then we need a spark plug. How does that spark, by the way? But then this is not in the center, so we need it off center, but then it stops, and then we got to add a counterweight. Okay, then how does that go to the engine? Now we need to add a flywheel, but then we should add gears, but then how do you stop it? Now, what's the best way to stop? Now, if you stop hard, then you go like this. We should do anti-lock brakes. We should add this. Okay, now there's a safety. So it's just layer by layer. There's no magical thing here. And also regarding your health, there's no magical reason why you're feeling bad one day, feeling great the next, or you get sick one day, or you don't. There is a specific reason that you can show. There was a great founder, or not great, he's okay. There's a founder who said, I don't think people understand how things come about. It's not magic that this is in my hand right now. Okay, there's so many people that had to work on this and had to be shipped here. There's a supply chain. There's just thousands of components and logistics that are slowly, layer by layer, brought into fruition until finally I get a phone from a store. And I'm trying to remove that nebulous, cloud that you think you can just go to the store and go buy a phone. You think you can just go to I used to sell cars, right? I think I said that in the last episode. That you can go to a place and just go buy a car. But there's the magic is in that humans found a way to somehow come together and to work on this problem and to finally have a product there and go, here you go. This is on sale for $25,000 US. Do you want it? Well, let's negotiate, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but that's the magic part. But otherwise, when it comes to engineering, there's no crossing fingers hoping for a miracle here. There's only a causal relationship. Things are happening because something else is happening. Our water pump, which I didn't explain here, water pump broke when I was a kid in DC. My father took me for a trip to DC, and the water pump broke in the Volvo, which I love that car. And we had to get it fixed for $500 back then. And it's not a magical thing that the car stopped that day. There's a reason why it happens. When it takes 5 minutes for the cabin to heat up, there's a reason. Now there's a reason because the coolant had to do this, and there's a reason why if you open the radiator cap, it's going to explode. There's a reason. Nothing is magical here. Everything happens for a reason. And I want you to kind of get that through to you, because using that honesty, you can solve a lot of the problems. I have an episode coming up. This is, I actually didn't expect to say this today. 2 nights ago at 12:30 a.m., I wrote an essay. I write essays all the time. I wrote an essay called To the Next School Shooter, because leadership is about diffusing the bomb that hasn't exploded yet. And right now, this is just the saddest generation of humans, where they are just hoping someone else will take care of the problem. So they're waiting for the next school shooting. And then they go, oh, thoughts and prayers. I go, no, you have to diffuse the bomb before it happens. You know that it's going to come. What can we do to prevent that? So I happened to write that essay. I was like, you know what, let me just release this for whoever is going to be the next person that has this thing. And 7 hours later, there's another mass shooting in my favorite country. I showed my friends. I was like, I can't believe the timing on this. I happened to write this at random. There was no reason to do it. I just wrote. I was like, you know what? I want to reach out to whoever's going through something, which I will release in a future episode. And I showed them. It's on my. It said 12:30 a.m. saved how to the next school shooter. And then just a few hours later, it happened again. Those kids are dead. Those adults are dead, and that's on me because I did not act soon enough. I have an apology video regarding all that later. This is why we're starting this channel, because I thought wiser men and women were going to be solving this, and they just never showed up. So it's up to me. I got to do something, because there is. Sorry, why I'm saying this, because there is a solution. It's not random that these school shootings are happening here, but not in Japan or not in India or whatever. There are reasons. Nothing is magical. So you can apply this to so many things outside of an engine. That's why it's not really about the engine that I want to show you. I just want to show you how things happen. It's not a magical thing that there's a school shooting. There's a reason. There's a series of your conscious decisions, by the way, made by these adults, these feckless adults that are just abandoning our children. And as Aristotle said, luck is the arrow hitting the heart of the guy next to you and not you. So they keep thinking, well, it's not me, until it is them. It's just happening everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's you have ruined the one holy place on earth, which is school. School is the holiest place on earth. School is the holiest place on earth. More than a church, more than a synagogue, more than a mosque. It is the holiest place on earth. Because a mind that is lucky to be alive, in the rare chance that you are alive, sentient, mobile, conscious, can manipulate your role, all these things. Now you're getting an education and you're learning things you did not know that morning as you woke up sleepily to go to school. When you come back, you are now a different person who knows something and goes, oh my God, I can look at this world differently. Like, I did not know that fact this morning when I went to school. But when I come home at 3, now I know that. And I'm just that much smarter, wiser, more able. And I can make a difference, like a leveraged difference. And for these shootings to happen, this is the, I don't want to say it, but because I don't have the data yet, but I like want to say this is the most effectless, lamest, cowardly generation of adults I've ever seen. Like, what are they doing to my country? What are they doing? In defense of them, the schemes that we have in the US are robbing them of their power. It's so hard to earn $1 on all this stuff that you just don't have the time to go save the world. That's a whole other argument that we should make. I completely understand that, but I want to stay with the argument that I'm sorry that I waited for others to solve the problem. I knew the answers a long time ago and I should have spoken up earlier, but at least we're speaking up now. Anyway, honey, sorry for that whole sad ending. This will all be for another episode, but I just want to say, like, that this isn't quite about a car. One day we are going to cottonball the last internal combustion engine. We already have electric cars and things like that, and one day this will all be just a distant memory. This thing, we chose to build this country around cars. That's why now the communities are all broken up, because the cities and the towns and the suburbs are all designed for cars, which then, we'll talk about this regarding smoking and how they broke smoking habits. It's by breaking the habit of the smoker. And if you break the design of a community such that humans don't interact, but you're servicing the car and not the person, and by servicing the car, that means that large lobby groups want a lot of money, so they just want everyone on a car. Everyone on a car, multiple cars, multiple everything, bigger, 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 and be separate, 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 separate. So now the design, sorry, I didn't expect to go into all this, but like the design of the streets, there's a ratio between like the building and the streets and how much you walk with your height. And so you can design a community that is fruitful, joyful, peaceful, nonviolent, happy, lucrative, wealthy, with a lot of longevity, where like you live a long, wealthy, happy life. But it is by design that we are now creating this culture now, and I have so much more to say about this, where I have an example with a baby and her mother that I talked to at Whole Foods the other day, and it was a shocking story she told me. Shocking, because it was like the canary in the coal mine. I was like, okay. Anyway, I'm going to keep going, so I'm going to stop here and we'll save it all for another episode. Or if you see this as like a bookmark, you can remind me in real life and I'll explain everything. One day we will cottonball the last one of these, just like we used to use whale oil. Then overnight we stopped using whale oil. We used to use horses for everything. Overnight, and once the cars are here, we stopped using horses. Now it's just like a thing if you happen to have a ranch and you want a horse. But that was the main mode. In the same way, this is the main mode now. But one day this will be like a distant memory where you'd be like, wait, remember when we all had to drive ourselves, and sometimes you were distracted or sleepy or high, or you're old, or you can't see, and then everybody. I have an argument regarding like the city that I want to build, that the problem with 405 traffic in Los Angeles, which is a nightmare, is that you have like a million brains operating differently, so it's not on the same schedule. So somebody was putting on the lipstick while somebody was on their phone, while somebody else is exhausted, while somebody else is high. Then they're all trying to operate together, so there's no flow there. That's the problem. But if things are automated, then there's a flow, because then like the computer knows, once this goes in, then I only have this much space. But right now people are just trying to work, and that's why there's traffic and the ramifications of traffic for your life. We'll talk about all this. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to shut up Jake, shut up Jake, shut up Jake. Okay. This, my point of these lessons is not for you to literally learn about how to play guitar, how to fly, how to act, how to write, how an engine works, how to deal with your hormones, how to deal with your body and health, how a computer works. We're going to show you all this stuff, how to travel, how to use a camera. Like, it's not literally that. It's for you to just extract the lessons from it and then see what you want to apply that to in other respects and also in your own life. Okay? So next time you start a car, You put the key in or you have the fob, whatever, you know. It's at rest. I turn the ignition, that relays, and it tells the battery to supply the starter motor with a lot of power. That starter motor comes out, goes, and then the flywheel goes, let's go. And the flywheel's going now. Now all the pistons are going. Everyone's like, all right, we're up, we're active. We got it. You got it, you good, you good? We on time? Yeah, we're on time. Why? All these pistons are firing, and it's a cold engine. Ooh, it's too cold. Oh, you know what, this is heating up pretty fast. Okay, well then we need some oil. The oil goes in, the scraper comes down. Okay, keep going with that oil. Okay, good. It's all going through the filter. Okay, good. And camshafts, everything's on time. How are we on time? Because we have a timing belt. Okay, great. And then it keeps going, and that keeps turning the flywheel. Now the flywheel is going to the gearbox, not yet. Now the engine's warming up, so we need coolant. That coolant is going through a short circuit. Now it gets a little warmer, so we need to go through the long circuit. Maybe it's a hot place. Now the fan needs to turn on to keep you cooling it off because you haven't moved the car yet. Then that liquid is expanding because it's under a lot of heat. And then what else? Then it's going through a cooling jacket. All the pistons are going. Okay, now you know the valves are opening, closing, opening, closing, opening, closing, opening, closing. But how's it on time with these dual overhead cams? And so there's fuel and air, compression, ignite through an ECU, I believe. The spark plug, power stroke, and then exhaust. Okay, now exhaust going through the catalytic converter, gets cleaned up, goes to the muffler, quiets it down. Okay, that's why it sounds okay in the morning. Now we're heating up a bit. Now the heat inside the car works because the engine's warmed up, so now the warm coolant is now coming at the wind from that's now coming into the cabin. Okay, now what were the other lessons we learned? Now you put into first gear. First gear, that's a larger gear, so you get a lot of a torque, and then the engine goes, and then the clutch engages, and now you get to move the car a little bit. Okay, 5-10 miles an hour. Second gear, third gear, fourth gear, fifth gear. Okay, now we're on like a major road. We're on a highway. Things are warmed up. The oil's going. What else do we talk about? Radiator. What else do we talk about, honey? Okay, now oh look, there's a pothole, but that felt like tum tum versus like tum tum because I have shocks, suspensions. Oh my God, there's like a kid that just crossed the road, hit the brake, and that engaged it. Okay, now we're good. Okay, so you know like the brake systems work, which has to downshift all the gears. Okay, what else did we talk about? Now I forgot everything we talked about. Crankshaft, all this, linear motion, sump. I forgot everything we talked about. Electronics, battery. You want the radio on, all those electronics are working, the temperature for the engine's going up. All right, baby, I'm forgetting everything now. There's brake fluid, all this stuff, safety belt, everything's good. Yeah, whatever, I'll just stop here. I don't even know where that example's going. This is how a car works, okay? All right, baby, be safe out there. This episode might be hours long, but be safe out there, and I hope you can apply this to other things. I love you and I love you. I can't wait to see you. Bye.